Okay, so there are three major issues that I want to talk about in terms of the Food and Energy Party. Right. So why am I standing? I'm standing because obviously I believe things are wrong. I'm going to be absolutely smashed up when it comes to the election. I know that, but I'm just hoping. I'm hoping, and I put my chances at about 1,000,000 to 1 that hopefully this provides a catalyst for change. And as I get started here, I want to give you three major issues that I'm really interested in, which is a quick summary of everything else that I'm going to be talking about. Okay, so the three big issues are: number one, energy; number two, food; and number three, just looking at economics in a different way, primarily based around the idea of productive potential. Okay. So the first one of these is the energy system. Now, as we all know, because of the Ukrainian war, the energy price went up and up and up. However, right, I do not believe that we can lay the blame on our energy crisis because the Russians happened to invade the Ukraine. And the basis of my idea is this. Is that if we had a green revolution, say starting in about 2008, we would have our own energy system. And if it was nationalised, we would be able to produce energy at 1/10 of the price than at the height of the boom period in energy prices, which gave BP and Shell enormous profits, which now give them even more power than they had before. Let me explain my thinking. Dale Vince, who runs Ecotricity, right, a really interesting guy who I later talk about in terms of these videos. He reckons that we spend £150 billion on energy, particularly at the peak of the crisis. And we should only be spending £15 billion a year. That is 1/10 of what we currently spend. So how do we get to this? Right. We need to have a green revolution. Now, there's a lot of localized decision making in this. So basically you have this big national framework which is produced by the government, and that provides the energy, so we can use energy from Scotland, or the Scots can use energy from us. If we take that thinking a little bit further, we can also have a supergrid which encompasses the whole of Europe and Africa as well, and we can transport the energy from those different nations, because ultimately we all need to combat climate change together. So why would energy be so much cheaper? Simply because the cheapest form of energy right now is onshore wind energy. And fundamentally, the Tories, for whatever reason, do not like onshore wind turbines, right? And I appreciate that they're also a bit of an eyesore, but that is far, far better than having a climate crisis where we just had the hottest month ever in recorded periods, which sets off fires, which sets off destruction. I don't want to go through all of the climate change stuff that you've heard numerous times, but fundamentally we've ignored these particular issues. So what that would mean in the UK, instead of having 8,000 onshore wind turbines, we might even have 50,000 onshore wind turbines. And instead of having 3,000 offshore wind turbines, we would increase that to about 15,000 offshore wind turbines. Right. And also we would use solar energy. Now, when we have that excess capacity in energy, which we clearly would have, if we have a massive oversupply of energy, we could then have energy free of charge at the margin. Okay, so we have loads of energy. We don't need to pay for energy, because fundamentally the cost of producing that energy would actually be free. Okay, which is all sorts of reasons, which would then give us a massive competitive advantage. So if you follow this logic, fundamentally, if your country has a really good energy system and can produce energy really cheaply, e.g. Saudi Arabia can get their oil at $10 a barrel. In Canada, it's at about $90 a barrel. In the UK, from the North Sea, we're probably looking at about $100 a barrel. So by definition, this energy is far, far more expensive. Right. A key part of that is also energy efficiency. But then what we would do is we would localize it. So we'd have this big national distribution network. We would then localize local energy. So, for instance, I'm from Framlingham. So Framlingham would have its own energy suppliers. It would be run by people from Framlingham. They would then be held to account by the people from Framlingham. It wouldn't be some government in London or in Brussels who is deciding about our energy systems. They would then know which houses are using more energy. They could literally knock on the door and say using too much energy, or we can insulate all the houses because we would know which houses are not well insulated. Which is actually a key part. Is probably the most beneficial aspect of any of these policies is actually energy efficiency. Okay, so you've got the basic argument that we would cut our energy bills so we'd all be far, far richer than we are currently now. So all this argument that the eco-extremists want us to live in hair shirts and everything else, we would actually all be wealthier if we'd had a green revolution. Okay, it's going to cost us a lot of money to set it all up. And that's also open to debate, but not only are we doing that, we're also having to be saving the planet at the same time, which is pretty important. Okay, number one. The second big idea is really to do with our food systems. And once again, I'm not the expert here, right? I'm not a really, really clever guy. I can absolutely guarantee that to you. I work hard and I read a lot of information. And I see myself more as a connector, but there's some incredibly intelligent people out there, but they're not being listened to. There's some incredibly intelligent people out there talking about climate change. We've been talking about climate change for a long period of time, but they're not being heard. There are scientists who know that we can change it. Okay, so I've just given you the figure that our energy at the height would have been a tenth of the price if we'd had a green revolution. Okay. I think the same sort of thing will happen in farming. Okay, let's just throw out some random stuff. Right. Allotments are as productive as our big monoculture agriculture, and they also produce food which is much more beneficial for us. So what I'm really looking for is a mix of like high-tech farming with low-tech farming. And the high-tech farming right now that I'm interested in, which may or may not work, is we would have been talking about solar panels 15 odd years ago, where we would have said, right, maybe the price is actually quite a lot. Since that time, they've fallen by about 95% in price. So instead of paying a pound per unit of energy, we're now spending 5p. And it's exactly the same with wind as well. So I'm really saying the same sort of idea about vertical farms. Now, for them to compete right now, right this minute, well, they are competing in terms of producing loads and loads of food. Right now, it's more expensive, but that will actually come down in price. But one of the key things that vertical farms need is cheap energy. Now, under the system of having a green revolution where energy at the margin is free, this would absolutely reduce their cost massively. Food is going to become a real issue, right? So I created the name of the Food and Energy Party about a year ago. This was before the massive rises in food prices. This was always going to happen, right? I can guarantee to you, if you read the Bank of England report, it does not talk about the fact that climate change is obviously going to raise food prices. E.g., look what's happened to our farmers this year. Right, okay, the rest of Europe is sort of burning. There's wildfires happening all over the place. But in the UK, we've actually had too much rain. So it's destroying the crops that we have. So therefore, the food price is also going to go up. Also, farmers having to pay more and more for their energy, more and more of their fertilizer is going up in price, because fertilizer is based upon oil, which we didn't have anyway, because we could have organic agriculture, which is far more productive. If you look at the whole basis of all of the costs. So we live under this myth that's been given, that organic is really expensive, that the green revolution is really expensive. This is just not true. We would then have organic food, which is much better for you anyway, and our systems would actually take off. But once again, right, having an agricultural system which is largely organic, and having these high-tech vertical farms, and having these smaller farms, and having better compost, etc., is enormously complex. But then that is down to the nature of man to be able to work out all of these issues. And people have worked out all of these issues as well. But once again, because we're in the hands of the oil companies, but also in the hands of these big corporate giants. And in a way, what they're doing is that they're telling us what's going on. So we have been disempowered. Now, I'm now sounding like some sort of eco-extremist. I can assure you that I'm not. I've written about this for the last 15 odd years. And our systems are becoming more and more unstable all the time. I was shit scared 15 years ago. I'm even more scared now about what's happening to the climate and about what's happening to biodiversity, about what's happening to all the social issues within the UK. Fundamentally, if we produce shit food and we eat shit food, then that's going to create all sorts of inflammation in our bodies, which is going to create all sorts of problems for us. Okay, all right. So we've done one, the energy systems. Number two, we've done the food systems. The third one, right, so we're now moving on to some pretty radical economics in terms of what I think. So in 2008, I came up with the idea that we could print money, and with that printed money, we could create a green revolution, which at the time, of course, was seen as being totally mad. I mean, if you can't print money because obviously that would then create inflation. Well, hey ho, when the banking system went under in 2008, by 2009, we printed 360 billion quid, which was largely given to the banks to save the banking system, which had created the crisis in the first place. When COVID came along, we printed 450 billion pounds. Once again, this was printed money. It kept the economy afloat. Now, in both phases, I can understand why the government at the time wanted to save the banking system, and I can understand why the government at the time in 2021 and 2022 also wanted to save us financially. However, right now, because of the very systems that we now have, partially because of Brexit, partly because of the climate crisis, right, the productive potential of the UK economy, for the first time ever in about 50 odd years, if we're looking at like a conventional period, our productive potential in the UK has actually decreased, which is astonishing, right? Congratulations to the current government for achieving the absolute impossible. Normally, the productive potential of an economy would increase by 2.5%. If we take into account the green revolution, artificial intelligence, new food systems, we might have a productive potential increasing by about 10%, which therefore means we can have much more demand in the economy and we can pay people more money. Okay, they would have to buy green energy, they'd have to buy more organic food, we'd have to be using artificial intelligence. But really, our economies thrive on shifting out how much we can produce. That then creates macro stability. So therefore, what I'm really suggesting is we don't need to be totally obsessed about national debt all the time, which is the reason why we got such high taxes in the UK economy at this moment in time. Now, the one thing that I want to guard against, all this is sounding a bit like some massive form of fairy tale that we can achieve all of these things. But from what I've read and from the research that I've done, right, this is all potentially possible. There is like this amazing way of completely transforming our economy. But we're not going to be able to transform our economy with the current way of thinking and with the current people in power at this moment in time. And I'm not saying that they're no good. I think if you have 600 MPs in a parliament, I would maybe suggest that 75% of those people are really good, really hardworking, and they want the right things. And that includes both Tories, both Labour. Obviously, I'm closer to the Green Party than anyone else, and happen to believe that Caroline Lucas is an extraordinary politician. But what I'm hoping to do by setting up this own party and through these series of videos is to explain the thinking behind each of these, not only these three ideas, because there's many more ideas than this that I want to be talking about. But unless you follow what the scientists are saying, both on climate, both on agriculture, both on the number of bees we have, both on everything, which no one can understand, right? I can't understand it all, right? And I read loads and loads. I have a sort of a vague understanding of what's going on. But all I'm really doing when I talk about all these things is I'm standing on the shoulders of some really, really clever people. Like, I'm standing on the shoulders of some really, really intelligent economists who actually tend to be female, as it happens, who see things in different ways and believe that we can do things differently. And all I'm really doing is I am connecting the dots. But watch all these videos and you'll understand where I'm coming from on all these issues. But we don't need some sort of minor change, right? Some Keir Starmer type change. Okay, he has come up with a really good idea of nationalising energy, but he seems to have gone back on that and spending loads of money on this because, as Ed Miliband said in his conference speech, it is 1/10 of the price. So why wouldn't we go out and do this? But we need to look at food systems. Otherwise, I can guarantee that people will be starving in the world. They will have complete chaos. We'll have the rise of ISIS. We'll have more chaos. We'll have the movement of the far right. All of these things will actually take place. And that is why we need to change the way in which we think. And we need to think globally, right? Big time. We need to entrust governments more, because governments, or even we all know what the problems are. We all know that climate change is one of the biggest issues. Most people fundamentally agree that preventing us in the first place is the best way of saving on our National Health Service. Most people agree with artificial intelligence could be transformative in a positive way. Most people believe that social media is a bit of a curse on society, particularly for young people. Right, we can probably agree on most things. And finally, right, absolutely 100%. If we're going to progress forward, it is basically that progression. It won't be some Boris Johnson who will come along and tell us, I've got these great ideas and I will give the economy a boost. I'll hopefully smash all that myth within these talks. It is basically fundamentally, we're going to have to work really hard, and we're going to have to trust people, and we're going to have to work, in particular, we're going to work with the science community. So as you hear me talk, right, this isn't anti-Tory or anti-Liz Truss or anything else. It is a belief that, in a sense, what Liz Truss was also saying is that we do need change, and as that we need to work hard, and we need to work hard together with a degree of diversity on all these issues, and then we have a chance of succeeding. Okay, so the three big ideas: energy systems need to change, number one. The food systems need to change, and if we do those two things, we'll have a massive rise in productive potential. And the last thing we need to do is we also need to think radically about the economy. I've probably gone on for too long, okay? But hopefully this is going to make sense to you. Thank you very much.